chased it up, and lo and behold, she found, I think it was the 1930 Ford Coupe that belonged to someone named Victor Paul Holker, who later became her husband. So she bought the car from him, and not only did she get the car, but she found her life partner, and who looked a lot like Horace Dawson. And they lived happily for many years until his tragic death at the age of 58. Now, about this Ford Coupe. Yes. She took us for a ride in this little car, Royal Oak Road, and we were turning the corner onto Hathaway Highway, and the door flew open, and I rolled out onto the road. Imagine the consternation. Luckily, nobody was coming behind, and I picked myself up and jumped back in, and away we went. But can you imagine how the driver would have felt under those circumstances? Now, turning the clock back a little bit, riding home from Sunday school, we always went to Sunday school, and I was riding on the back of Vi's bike on the carrier, holding on to her with my legs sticking up like this. And all of a sudden I lost concentration, and my foot went down and got caught in the wheel and ground off all the flesh on my shin bone. Another time, poor old Vi got into a muddle, and we had to call the doctor, which is something we didn't do unless someone was around. But it was me, and I was the only one. And, you know, these things come along. You mentioned, or you didn't mention, one thing Linda didn't mention. Well, there are so many things. Vi was, because she was one of the oldest, she was often a babysitter, and she didn't care for babysitting. And Goldie tells the story. Goldie's outside there somewhere. Where are you, Goldie? Yeah, Vi babysitting her, taking her out to the trees beside her house and tying her to a tree. And she sat there dutifully, you know, I'm supposed to be tied to this tree, that's what she told me to do. And after a while she untied herself and went into the house, and there was Vi sitting reading. She was a great reader. And in order to get away from all these kids that were underfoot, she found a tree and she got a few pieces of old lumber and she nailed them to the tree to form handholds and footholds, and she would climb up there and read her books. Now, lo and behold, woe betide anybody who went up there, because this was her private domain. Now, one day when she wasn't at home, and we were all playing outdoors, my sister Dorothy, the next one in line, she decided to climb up into the tree to see what was up there. She got halfway up and she fell off, and she broke her arm. Now, just picture yourself, a mother with 6 kids living in the woods, no near neighbor. What was she to do? Well, she turned to the next oldest one, who happened to be Muriel. I think she was 11 years old, and as big as a minute, and she said, Muriel, you'll have to go and get Daddy to come home and take us to the hospital, to the doctor. So little Muriel had to run down to the mental home, which is now the Wilkinson Road Jail, in her play clothes, a mile and a half away. She went through the stone gates and up the stairs and through this great big door. And stood there, and someone came along and said, well, little girl, what do you want? She said, I want my daddy. So he found her daddy, and he jumped in his old car and came home and took Dorothy to the hospital. That's the kind of environment we lived in during those very early days. So I mentioned the marriage to Victor Bruce Holker, and not too long after to Victor Paul. Not long after, they had a child named Victor Bruce, who's unfortunately not here because he's not well. And he was the most beautiful child He had lovely big gray eyes and beautiful olive skin, and he grew up to be really a most beautiful child. And I was babysitting quite often for them when I went shopping or whatever. And I was often in the house in the evenings when they did their homework. He was a salesman for Marshall Wells hardware sales people. And they would sit making up his orders that he had taken during the day. I was the secretary and he was the sales. And this would go on for hours, and it went on for years. It was tough, but they did it. And in the meantime, they were planning their house that they built together on Linwood Avenue, and it was understood that it wouldn't cost more than $2,100. And it didn't. Along came Rod and Linda, who are sitting over here, and at about this time they built their second house on Linwood Avenue, and Vi was there working, shovel in hand or paintbrush or whatever, and I know this because I went and helped them a time or two. Having taken care of all these responsibilities, they gave up their jobs, they went to Europe for 5 months, and Vi, of course, was responsible for looking after all the clothing and all the accommodation, cleaning up of all the things that housewives do. And at the same time, as they drove along, she was working on her typewriter, and she wrote a book about the travels in Europe that I think she hoped she would sell as a travel book. Now, where is it?
Okay.
I would like to read it. I'm almost through here. By this time, I was living in Duncan with my family, and Vi and Dick often came to visit us. They enjoyed it. They had country life. And in fact, they were godparents to our boy, Christopher. And shortly after, Vic died, unfortunately, and Vi had to pick up the pieces and get herself a job and straighten things around. And this carried on for quite a number of years until George Tait appeared on the scene, and you heard about their trips to Arizona. And we enjoyed that relationship also, having them up to visit us frequently, and we went there for lunch and so forth. And it was great. George died at the age of 87, leaving Vi stranded once again, and a few years later she had this disastrous stroke. Which brings us today, except there was an interval of 10 years where she was looked after by these people here, and it was a very tough time, a very sad time. And we often think if someone had been with her when she had this initial stroke, she could have maybe been saved and could have kept her mind, and she could have been herself for all those 10 years. So today we remember Vi as a very disciplined person. She was honest, generous, compassionate, loving, hardworking, dedicated, and you get the picture. She was an excellent role model for the rest of us who came later on, and we miss her. We miss her a lot. But we take comfort